Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to the sheep pen, bah, where no goats are allowed. So, I talk about a lot of topics on this channel, but one topic I've never talked about is some of the difficulties and issues that being a pastor or a preacher or minister brings to your life. And, it's not an easy path, it's not an easy life. Um, I could go into detail about it, and maybe someday I will. It's valuable to know these things, especially if you are a person who is considering entering into the ministry. And one of the reasons I started pursuing truth and pursuing spiritual knowledge is because as a very young person, I started to see a lot of what I consider BS answers to questions that pastors are asked. They'll give you a cop out answer. What's an example of some cop out answers? Um, God works in mysterious ways. That is one of the ones that really got to me. It's, pastors have a real problem just saying, I don't know. And you tend to be the person who has all the answers, and when you don't, sometimes you'll make up some of these baloney statements. God is in control. That's another one. Everything happens for a reason. That's another one. And so I set out to look at specifically how tragedy and misfortune, what's the cause of it? What are some things we can do to remedy it? How do we cope with it? And so many times, rather than doing that difficult thing, pastors will just use these blanket statements. And it was one of my early pet peeves. But occasionally I find myself in the same kind of situation where the easy way out is to just say, God works in mysterious ways, or everything will work out in the end. Now, I do like to offer the scripture that God is at work in all things to the benefit of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And so, that is a blanket statement that kind of is along the same lines of God is in control, or everything will work out in the end, or just trust God. But I think that there's more to a lot of the tragedy and misfortune that people encounter, and being able to properly identify the source of these problems can give you better opportunities to remedy them. And just throwing your hands up and saying, well, it's God's will, or, well, we don't, that's a kind of a cop out. And I think that my ministry foundation was based on getting to the bottom of some of these cop outs, some of these kind of lame answers that I would get from ministers. And so recently, I was faced with one of these situations where someone brought me a difficult problem that they were involved in. And this is somebody that's been very instrumental in keeping this channel going. So, not just in financial support, but in actual labor. And I've never met this person, but I feel like I know them, and we've been talking for a long time. Recently, they kind of been struggling, and they're involved in a difficult situation, a life-changing situation. And they sent me an email. And just so you know, I did not respond to this email because I've been chewing on it all week long. It's one of those emails where you're like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to respond to that. So I had to kind of go back to the basics. I had to go back to the core. I had to go back to God on this deal to come up with an answer. I didn't want to give them a, well, it's all going to work out in the end kind of answer. And it led me to this sermon, which I think is very important. And if I had to give it a title, I would say that this is about identifying the source of misfortune and of tragedy. Okay? And just so the viewer knows, this is in response to an email titled F Cancer. Okay? Cancer is wreaking havoc in this person's life. Not them individually, but through someone else. And so it caused me to sit down and really categorize and catalog all the different sources of misfortune and problems in people's lives to get to the one that was applicable in this situation. And most misfortune, most tragedy is self-caused. It's self-imposed. Um, I think the biggest cause of misfortune and tragedy in people's lives is what the Eastern philosophers call karma, what Jesus referred to as sowing and reaping. That doesn't apply to this case that I'm talking about, but I want to cover all the bases because I think this is an important message for everyone to understand. And so, a lot of times, bad things that happen to us are directly related to decisions that we make, bad decisions that we personally make. We're personally responsible for our own problems. In the majority of cases, I won't put a number to it, but better than half of the tragedies out there are caused because we have it coming. Okay. To give you an example, if you treat other people with callous disregard, chances are karma, sowing and reaping, you can call this God, right? I've said in the past that karma and God are the same thing, that sowing and reaping is like a power of the universe, and it's definitely linked to God. And so sometimes we're forced to learn lessons. And if you callously disregard someone else's feelings, you can find yourself put in that exact same position so you can feel what it's like to need empathy, to need someone's help. And it can teach you empathy. It can teach you a hard lesson. Sowing and reaping is all about learning these difficult lessons in life. And you can avoid a lot of karma, a lot of the sowing and reaping by carefully putting yourself in someone else's shoes. That ability to pull yourself out of how this affects me and put yourself in the other person's shoes can help you make decisions that will help you to avoid these seasons of reaping what you have sowed. It makes you more careful about what seeds you sow. You sow love, you get love. You sow callous disregard, you will receive that in return. This is a power of the universe, a character of God, whatever you want to call this. Justice is another concept of this. And, they call it karmic justice or universal justice or just God doing what God does. And so God wants to teach us lessons. If I could give you a reason for this life, the reason for this life is to learn. It is to advance. It is to become a better human, a better creature, right? It is to grow in wisdom. And so sowing and reaping is responsible for probably at least half of the tragedy out there. Whatever, you might have done something in the past that forces God into a position to teach you a lesson, okay? Once again, that's not the case with my friend and his email that he sent. What's another source of tragedy? Well, just straight up demonic attack. It goes back to what Paul says, put on the full armor of God so you can withstand the attack of the enemy, that you can stand in that day, that evil day. And so the devil is at work in all things, trying to destroy our lives. The devil's like a roaring lion, roaming to and fro, seeking whom he may devour. His goal is to kill, steal, and destroy. So another portion, a great portion of the tragedies and issues that people face are related directly to a demonic attack. Those are the easiest ones to overcome because all you got to do is put on the full armor of God. All you have to do is do what you're supposed to do and do the right thing and stand up for yourselves and get some courage and become a spiritual warrior, and you can defeat the enemy, okay? And that's a big portion of what is taught on this channel, is spiritual self-defense, because you can be doing everything right, you can be serving God, you can be winning, and tragedy will come out of nowhere and blindside you. And being able to determine, is this karmic, right? Did I sow some seed that now I'm reaping? Or is this did I have this coming? Or is this just the devil coming out of the clear blue to come after you? And if, less than half, but a big majority of, not big majority, a big portion of tragedy comes from demonic attack. just out of the blue, the devil's after you, right? That's one of the easiest ones to defeat because Jesus defeated the devil on the cross, and we were given all power and authority over the evil one. And we can, with the proper training and the right approach, defeat the devil in these kind of blatant attacks. One of the other sources of tragedy, which you might call chronic tragedy, chronic bad luck, is in the form of curses. And a lot of times these are what you would call generational curses. Now, it's not that God is holding people responsible for what their ancestors did. Jesus disproved that and came against that in the New Testament. You're not responsible for the sins of your father. However, your father and mother, your family, your extended family, they often pass on to you bad decision-making skills. They pass on to you bad anger management skills. They pass on to you a predisposition for seeking to escape through addictions and drugs and alcohol. And those are for you to overcome in your life. It's one of the biggest struggles, is overcoming these generational curses. And yes, there are some spiritual warfare things you can do to stop the demonic assignments against you, to stop the devil from continuing to try to use these well-worn pathways and traps that have worked on your ancestors and your family. And of course, there's something to be said for, there is a genetic component oftentimes in addiction. This can be overcome through spiritual means, right? But because it's your decision to follow suit in the family tradition, you have the right to choose whether you fall into addiction, whether you fall into bad decision making, whether you let your anger go unchecked. And so dealing with these things that we basically learn from our family is one of the key struggles in the Christian walk. And oftentimes it's one that hopefully we whip rather early on in our lives so that it's not still plaguing us into our old age. This is part of old age wisdom, is overcoming your family programming, overcoming your cultural programming, and rising above that, right? So what's another source of tragedy and misfortune? Well, this kind of leads me to one of the ultimate cop-outs that Catholics in particular, and I heard some of Mother Teresa's statements on this, and they sound very calloused, but the concept that suffering is necessary for you to grow spiritually, and that through suffering we can identify with Christ. This is kind of a Catholic concept, but in the evangelical circles it's the same thing, but maybe expressed in a different way, where we say you're going through trials and tribulations, and God is putting you through the fire of testing to make you a stronger person. And I'm not discounting that. That is actually a thing, right? It's obvious in the story of Job. But don't forget, there was a prosecuting attorney, the devil, in that story, who challenged God, who caused it all to happen. So, you can still go back and put the blame on the devil for these sort of things, because at least in the story of Job, he's challenging God, that Job would, turn his back on God if the proper trials and tribulations were applied to him. And of course, he proved that he could overcome that and not turn his back on God. And then God restored everything to him. And that is one thing about trials and tribulations. If that's what you're facing, if it's not bad decision-making karma coming back to get you, if it's not family curses coming back to get you, bad behavior based in your family's bad behavior, okay? Bad patterns, right? Then it could be just trials and tribulations. And I do believe that that's a tiny percentage of, misfortune and tragedy. It comes from being tested by fire, God putting you through something to make you stronger. That does happen. But unfortunately, in churches, that's one of the preacher cop-outs. This is just a trial. It's just a tribulation. This too shall pass. Just hang in there. Keep praying. Be strong, right? And they can use that as a blanket get out of jail free card on their part, so they don't have to answer the deeper questions of maybe this is family curses. Maybe this is bad karma, right? You sowed this, now you're reaping it. They can just throw it up to blame it on God. And there's a problem with that. When you use that when it's not applicable, you can cause people to hate God. There's a lot of people, some of you watching this channel have come back from this bad thinking once you realize there's a real live devil, right? It could just be demonic attack. But I tend to blame the devil in 90% of cases. He's behind all of it, you know. But in that small percentage, sometimes God does try us and he does test us. But that is not the blanket reason for all of misfortune to Christians. It's not all just a test, right? Sometimes you're responsible in some way. Sometimes there's a lesson. I hate to keep using the word karma, but it's easier than sowing and reaping. Maybe there's a sowing and reaping lesson that you needed to learn. Maybe you needed to learn compassion because you've been compassionless. Maybe you needed to learn forgiveness because you've been unforgiving in the past. And it's God's way of teaching us. That's what sowing and reaping really is, a lesson. And it's a lesson the hard way. But too many times, ministers will blame God and say, well, you're being tried, you're being tested. Just hang in there and pass the test, right? Well, that's easy for the pastor to say, right? That's easy for them. That's an easy out for them. But I think that's one of the things behind this ministry is I went a little deeper and went, well, maybe it's karma. Maybe it's a demonic attack. Maybe it's a family curse. Maybe you've got somebody working black magic against you, right? Maybe there's an assignment against you and your family. And so it can be any of these things. And occasionally it really is God testing us through fire, especially if it's related to temptation. If you have, if you keep flunking the same test, right? You keep getting tempted with the same behavior and you keep going back like a dog returning to their vomit. You keep going back to your old behaviors, then misfortune and tragedy can befall you. And it's a testing process. It's putting you in the same situation over and over again, hoping you learned your lesson and will make a different decision this time and overcome it and once and for all beat that bad behavior or bad decision-making process. And so, I mean, you could relate that to karma and sowing and reaping, but there is definitely scriptural foundation for undergoing trials and tribulations for the purpose of making you stronger, better, and more well-adjusted in this world. Which leads me to the final one, and I hope I haven't missed any of them, but one more source of misfortune, trials, tribulations, bad luck, whatever you want to call it, a lack of blessings in a situation, that, and this one's almost never talked about, right? And this is why I struggled with this email, this F Cancer email all week. And I'm going to send a message and reply to that email to let you know that I didn't just read you and forget you, that you actually caused me to do some deep thinking, right? That the final one is burden bearing. That many times we face what looks like trials and tribulations and struggles, misfortune in our life, not because of anything we did, not because of any attack against us personally, but because we are in communion with or in covenant with someone else. And it's their issue, but yet it affects us. And this is one of the hardest ones to deal with because there's very little that you can do to stop it. I mean, your choice is to cut the person out of your life or to just endure it with them. You know, this is why it's very important that you carefully pick who you come into covenant with, who you befriend, who you make part of your circle, who you bring into your wing of protection. because they don't come alone. For one thing, they come with other people that they're in covenant with, and you can be affected by something that's not happening with your person, but with somebody in your person's life that affects them, and that affects you. And that's what's going on in the case of this email that I received. That the person in question that sent the email, in my opinion, they've been doing the right thing for some time. They do the hard thing. They're hardworking. They're faithful, and they find time to do God's work, even in a very difficult life where it's just difficult to make ends meet. You're just doing what you got to do to pay the bills, right? And then on top of that, they still find time to do things to help out this channel and to do good things for other people. But when you go into covenant with someone, when you marry someone, when you befriend someone and make a friend commitment with them and let them into your life, then their fight is your fight. Their trouble is your trouble. Their issues become your issues. And rightfully so. That's what being friends, that's what being family is all about. Your fight is my fight. Your struggle is my struggle. And, your triumph is my triumph, right? That's almost at the nature of true friendship, true connection, true relationship. And even when you carefully choose the people you let in your life, because they have people that they've let into their life, either let in or actually were, their family, and they were born into this covenant with them, born into this relationship, then you're taking on not just their issues, but their family issues and their friends' issues. And suddenly, something way beyond your control, outside of your circle of influence, can suddenly affect your life. And this may be one of the most difficult types of tragedy and misfortune to deal with, because it has almost nothing to do with you. You're being affected by some second or third degree of separation relationship, right? Maybe it's an in-law. Maybe it's your friend's uncle or brother. And suddenly, because they're in covenant with someone, and so that means when they have a struggle, then your person has to back them up, right? Which means you have to back up your person. And it's something far enough removed away from you, but there's still a ripple effect. And this is also one of the ways that demons get to people that are untouchable. I've talked about this before. They don't just attack you, they attack someone else in your circle, because they know how it's going to affect you. They know that it's going to become an issue for you because of the effect they have on this third party. And this can go back to several layers. And this falls under the category of burden bearing. It is our responsibility to bear the burdens of our friends and loved ones. And it's one of the hardest things as a pastor, because there's really not much that you can do to change the situation. You kind of have to take the good with the bad and realize that you've gotten something from this relationship, and now it's your turn to back up your person who's backing up somebody else, right? In an instant, for instance, and your wife's family has a family tragedy. Now your wife has to go and deal with the family tragedy, and it's your job to back her up, and you had nothing to do with this. And it leaves people feeling somewhat powerless. And that's kind of the nature of this email I received. The person feels very powerless, and it's easy to blame God. It's like, God, what did I do? Well, you didn't do anything, right? This is one of those other reasons for tragedy striking somebody else. You can't control anybody else, just yourself. And the ripple effect, the tide has come in, the wake of what happened over there is now affecting you. And it's one of those situations where when you're a pastor and you see this happening, it does look hopeless. You don't have anything to say to the person, right? You don't have a solution, right? Because they can't really fix somebody else. They can only fix themselves. But because of their relationship with this person and this person's relationship with someone else in their circle, it has affected you. And in that, I tend to have to go back to what sounds like platitudes. God is at work in all things to the benefit of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. That what seems like bad luck, like what seems like uh, a hopeless situation, trust me, God is still at work in the situation for your benefit. That you do have to see it through. This is one of those trials and tribulations where you just have to ride it out. You got to go take your family member so they can go do something for this other person, and you got to take time off from work, or you have to give up one of your vehicles, or you have to reach in your pocket and help them out financially. And it doesn't have much of anything to do with you. But at the risk of sounding like I'm handing out platitudes, I think this is one of the few situations where it's really hard to come up with a solution that you can, what you can do. But know this, God probably put you in that situation because you can help, because you can write a check, because you can loan someone a vehicle, because you can take time out of your day. And it is a hardship. It is a difficulty. But you are laying up treasures in heaven when you help other people deal with their situation, even when you don't have to, even when you're completely removed from the situation, right? Yes, doing the right thing and helping people sometimes hurts. It puts you in a tough situation. It might cause you to have to endure things like loneliness or financial struggles, or in the case of my friends, you might have to drive a 30-year-old truck that you're not sure will get to point A to point B. But this is where you trust God. You trust God that he put you in this situation so you could be a blessing. He put you in this situation because he knew you could handle it. He put you in this situation because if you don't do it, who's going to? And yeah, it hurts. It kind of feels like it sucks, right? But at the same time, know that there's a blessing on the other side. When you burden bear for someone else, it can feel like it's an attack against you personally. It can feel like bad luck. It can feel like misfortune. But actually, you're under an assignment from God when you burden bear for someone else. This is the final answer to the tragedy question, and it's one that I just worked out this week. That if you're being affected by somebody else's drama, the reality is God put you in that person's life so you could bear their burden. Because you're stronger than them, because you have more than them, because you're more capable than them, because your emotional, spiritual strength is in a position to be able to help. And it does serve as a trial and tribulation, a trial by fire. Sharing in someone else's struggle, burden bearing for someone else, is one of the most difficult things we're called upon to do as Christians. But when you do that, you don't just grow as a person. You don't just overcome your own potentially bad karma, right? You're paying it forward. You're laying up treasures in heaven, right? You're doing the hard work of ministry on this earth. And it can seem like, what did I do to deserve this, God? Everything was going so well, and then something happened beyond my control that has affected my life. It's one of those times where you have to look at it like a mission. And no mission is accomplished without paying the price, right? In blood, sweat, tears, in money gone out of your pocket, in time spent. But it's for a righteous reason, and you wouldn't have been put in this situation as a believer if God wasn't relying on you. He needs you to do that job of burden bearing. Even if you get backlash, even if the problem becomes your problem, that is what burden bearing is. Your problem becomes my problem. Your struggle becomes my struggle. And when you win, your triumph becomes my triumph. And know this, when you engage in burden bearing, when you carry the load for someone, when you pray for them, when you give them support, when you do things for them, you're laying up treasures in heaven. God is marking it on your permanent record, and it can help you overcome your own bad seeds that you've planted in the past. It can give you more spiritual power and strength against the devil when he comes against you. Right? When the next battle is one where the devil is attacking you directly, you have more authority when you've been a burden bearer. You have more clout. It can give you spiritual power. It can make you stronger when in your own struggles. And a lot of times, sometimes the people that we help are unappreciative. That's their gig. That's their issue. You have to do the right thing. If you don't get paid back by the person you're helping or by the person that they're helping, right? If you don't see any kind of compensation from that situation, know this, that it's on credit to your account, and you'll get that from some other place. You'll get some miracle from some other person that will burden bear for you, even if that person walks away from you. Even if you lose that person through that and you do the right thing, you're sowing good seeds and you're putting credit on your account in heaven. Tragedy, misfortune, bad luck, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes it's our own doing. Sometimes it's the devil working against us. Sometimes it's just God putting us through something so that we can learn to be stronger. And sometimes we're burden bearing for someone else. That's one of the hardest things to do. Because your instinct is to walk away. Your instinct is to look out for number one, right? That's what the devil's telling you. That's what the world's telling you. That's what people tell you. But when you do it anyway, when you let their tragedy affect your life and bear that burden with them, when you pray for them, when you give them assistance, when you help them, you are doing the work of the Almighty. You are doing a good thing. And it will come back to you. It is sowing the seeds of love and kindness. It is, whether that person helps you or someone else helps you in the future, if you ever need help, you got credit on account when you burden bear for someone else. I hope this helped you unravel your past, your present, and help you in the future. I will always avoid saying it's all in God's will. I will always avoid saying it's a mystery. I will always avoid saying God works in mysterious ways, because there is a structure to everything under the sun. That God is a God of order. And even when it looks like disorder and chaos, there's a reason. And understanding these reasons give you the proper motivation and pathway to overcome these problems when they arise. Is it something you did? Is it just the devil out to get you? Is God trying you? Or are you being called to bear the burden for someone else? I hope you got something from this. I hope you learned from this. I want you to know I can't continue to make these videos without your financial support, without your moral support. So like the video, share the video, check your subscription, make sure you weren't unsubscribed from the channel. Send me a message of encouragement. Leave a comment in the comment section. And if you look in the description of this video, you will find links to financially support this channel so I can keep making these videos. Because without your financial support, I'm unable to dedicate the necessary time to work out things like the mystery that I just unraveled this week with divine inspiration. I hope you found this helpful. Once again, the links in the description for email, PayPal, Cash App, all of that. P.O. Box if you want to write me a letter. Thanks to all of you who support this channel, and I'll leave you with this powerful prayer. May God surround you in his ring of fire and hedge of thorns of protection. May he send mighty angels of sufficient rank, authority, and number to drive the enemy from your midst. May he encircle you in this circle of protection that continues to expand so that God is protecting not just you, but everyone you're in covenant with, everyone you're in agreement with, everyone you're in a relationship with. May that then expand to all of them. May all of you and your relationships fall under God's protection. And when you're called to burden bear, I pray that God strengthens you, mind, body, soul, and spirit. That I pray that God shows you the value of what it is you do for the kingdom when you burden bear for other people. In Jesus' name. And may you be surrounded in God's peace, even in the midst of the fight. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. We'll see you next time on the Sheep Pen.